Under the bright lights of a rain-washed Manhattan evening, the city's skyline gleams like a restless sea of glass and ambition. At its heart, a crowd gathers outside City Hall, their voices mingling with the sound of car horns and camera shutters. New York, home to diversity, contradiction, and unyielding energy, is about to witness a new chapter in its political story. Tonight, the city has elected Zohran Mamdani as its new mayor, a socialist in America's most iconic metropolis, a name that now carries the promise and the burden of transformation. The applause that greets him feels electric. For many, this moment marks not only a local victory, but a symbolic one, an ideological statement delivered from the birthplace of Donald Trump himself. And when Mamdani takes the microphone, his words are not those of a cautious politician, but of a man declaring a mission. Together, we will lead the way to a generation of change, he says, his voice cutting through November chill. And if we embrace this courageous new path, rather than run from it, we can respond to oligarchy and authoritarianism with the strength they fear, not the appeasement they seek. After all, if anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave him birth. The crowd roars. It is both a political rally and an emotional release. Mamdani, born to Ugandan and Indian parents, raised in Queens and shaped by years of activism, has turned what once seemed like an ideological outlier into a mainstream victory. His words echo through the avenues like a challenge to the establishment, a signal that the post-Trump era may be defined not by imitation, but by reinvention. For the next half hour, we trace the story behind that moment, the rise of a movement that grew out of frustration, community organizing, and a belief that New York could become not just a city of opportunity, but a model of resistance. In the boroughs of Queens and Brooklyn, where Mamdani first began as a community organizer, the seeds of this victory were sown years earlier. Long before campaign posters appeared on lampposts, he was standing with tenants, fighting eviction, leading marches for immigrant rights, and advocating for affordable transit. He wasn't a celebrity candidate, nor the product of an elite political machine. He was a grassroots insurgent who built his campaign block by block, conversation by conversation. Political analysts have described his rise as part of a generational shift, a move away from centrist pragmatism toward an unapologetic left that seeks structural change rather than incremental reform. But for Mamdani, it was always about people. Our campaign, he told supporters earlier this year, was never about me. It was about a city that refuses to give up on itself. That message found fertile ground in a city where inequality remains as visible as the skyline itself. The promise of change resonates deeply. From the Bronx to Staten Island, housing costs have soared, wages stagnated, and essential services stretched thin. To many residents, Mamdani's campaign became a mirror of their own frustration and their own hope. The symbolism of New York electing a socialist mayor cannot be overstated. It is, after all, the city that built the modern image of capitalism, Wall Street, global finance, and the headquarters of multinational power. To have its leadership handed to someone who speaks of redistributing wealth and defeating oligarchy is a profound inversion of political gravity. As dawn breaks over the East River the morning after his victory, newspapers across the country carry his words. Headlines read, "The city that gave Trump birth has chosen his opposite." For Mamdani's supporters, this is not just poetic justice. It is the embodiment of democracy reclaiming its purpose. But the challenge that lies ahead is immense. Governing New York City is a balancing act few have mastered. Every mayor inherits not just a city, but a complex ecosystem of power. Unions, corporations, bureaucracies, and communities that rarely move in harmony. For a candidate who has promised sweeping reform, every decision will now be tested by reality. Still, Mamdani's background offers clues to how he might navigate it. Born in Kampala to parents who fled dictatorship, he grew up hearing stories of displacement and resilience. His mother, a filmmaker, and his father, a scholar of post-colonial studies, instilled in him the belief that politics is not about prestige, but about purpose. That ethos carried him into activism, then into state politics, and finally into this moment of national spotlight. Across America, reactions to his win are divided. Progressive movements hail it as a breakthrough. Conservative voices dismiss it as a New York anomaly. But both sides agree on one thing: the symbolism is undeniable. The city that once celebrated Donald Trump as a builder now celebrates Zohran Mamdani as a reformer. Political observers note that Mamdani's rhetoric bears echoes of 20th century reformers: Franklin Roosevelt's promise of a New Deal, Fiorello LaGuardia's crusade against corruption, even Bernie Sanders' call for economic justice. Yet, his message carries a distinctly 21st century urgency, shaped by climate anxiety, post-pandemic recovery, and the widening chasm between rich and poor. As he steps into office, the city around him reflects those contradictions. Luxury towers rise beside homeless shelters. Wall Street bonuses break records, even as food pantry lines grow longer. For Mamdani, the mission is not only to bridge these divides, but to redefine what leadership in America's largest city looks like. In interviews following his victory, Mamdani has emphasized the need to democratize city governance, opening decision-making to the neighborhoods that feel forgotten. He has pledged to overhaul public housing, expand access to mental health care, and push for a Green New Deal for New York, transforming the city's infrastructure while creating thousands of unionized jobs. But beneath the policy proposals lies a deeper narrative, a moral one. To him, the fight against inequality is inseparable from the fight for democracy itself. When a city allows wealth to dictate worth, he once said during a rally, it forgets its humanity. Outside City Hall, posters bearing his face flutter beside murals of working-class heroes and civil rights leaders. Young volunteers, many voting for the first time, speak of how his campaign gave them a sense of agency. For them, Mamdani represents not just politics, but possibility. Yet, for all the celebration, the road ahead will be contentious. Business leaders warn that his economic policies could chase investment from the city. Real estate developers prepare for confrontations over rent control and zoning. Police unions, wary of his calls for accountability, are already mobilizing. Mamdani's administration will begin not with a honeymoon, but with a trial by fire. Still, his supporters argue that confrontation was always part of the plan. To challenge entrenched power, they say, is not to disrupt the city, it is to renew it. And in a political landscape still shadowed by Trump's influence, Mamdani's defiance offers a new counter-narrative that the American story is still being rewritten from the ground up. Across the nation, progressive movements in Chicago, San Francisco, and Atlanta cite his victory as evidence that left-wing politics can succeed even in the face of conservative backlash. Within hours of the election results, hashtags like #NewYorkTurnsLeft and #DefeatTrumpism trend globally. International media frame it as a turning point. New York's socialist mayor promises to reclaim the American dream. Analysts debate whether Mamdani's success signals a broader realignment in US politics, one where local governments become laboratories of national change. As the weeks unfold, his transition team begins work from a modest office in Queens rather than a midtown tower. The decision, he explains, is deliberate. Government should be where the people are, he tells reporters. It is a symbolic gesture, but one that reinforces his campaign's central theme, that power belongs not to the privileged few, but to the collective many. In neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs, murals and posters begin to appear with his now famous line, "If anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave him birth." The phrase becomes both a rallying cry and a challenge. What does it mean to defeat Trump? For Mamdani, it is less about one man and more about dismantling the systems that enabled him the concentration of wealth, the erosion of trust, and the politics of division. Political commentators argue that his greatest test will come not from the right, but from within his own coalition. To keep together the diverse alliance that carried him to victory, young voters, labour unions, immigrant communities and progressive activists will require a delicate balance of idealism and pragmatism. Inside City Hall, aides describe his working style as intense but collaborative. He begins each day with neighbourhood briefings, inviting local leaders to speak directly about their concerns. "We can't fix what we don't understand," he tells his staff. The tone of his administration's early days contrasts sharply with the combative rhetoric of national politics. Where Trump once used New York as a stage for bravado, Mamdani uses it as a platform for reflection. He often reminds reporters that leadership is not about dominance, it's about direction. As months pass, his policies begin to take shape. Pilot programs to freeze evictions in vulnerable districts, expanded free public transit routes for low-income workers, a tax on speculative real estate holdings. Each move sparks debate and sometimes outrage, but also garners praise from those who feel, for the first time in years, that City Hall is listening. His most ambitious proposal, the New York Climate and Equity Plan, envisions converting abandoned industrial zones into renewable energy hubs. It is both environmental and economic reform, promising 100,000 new jobs while cutting emissions citywide. Critics call it unrealistic, supporters call it visionary. For Mamdani, it is simply necessary. In speeches across the city, he ties local struggles to global ones, housing justice to climate justice, workers' rights to democracy itself. New York, he says, must once again become the city that leads. Yet despite his progressive agenda, Mamdani insists that his goal is not to divide, but to unite. We cannot heal a nation by hating our neighbours, he tells a room of business leaders. We must persuade, not punish. By his first anniversary in office, his approval ratings remain high among working-class voters, though scepticism lingers among corporate circles. Still, his administration's transparency, live-streamed budget sessions, open-door town halls wins cautious respect, even from opponents. Political historians note that New York's mayors often become national figures. LaGuardia in the 1,930 seconds, Lindsay in the 1,960 seconds, Giuliani in the 1,990 seconds. Whether Mamdani will join that lineage remains to be seen. But what is clear is that his rise reflects a deeper shift in America's political DNA, a yearning for authenticity in an age of cynicism. And so, under the shadow of skyscrapers once built on Trump's vision of power, Zohran Mamdani now stands as its counterpoint, a man who believes power should serve, not dominate. His victory speech, simple yet charged, continues to echo in "Together we will lead the way to a generation of change." In a world where politics often divides more than it heals, New York's new mayor offers a different message that even in the most unlikely of places, democracy can still reinvent itself.
Together we will usher in a generation of change. And if we embrace this brave new course, rather than fleeing from it, we can respond to oligarchy and authoritarianism with the strength it fears, not the appeasement it craves. After all, if anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him.